Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a special Halloween edition of Let's Dev. That's right, this month we'll be covering my journey to build a special Halloween themed game. From the haunting code to the spooky visuals and the themes that hide within, I'll be breaking down my latest project, one that you'll get to experience for yourself at the end of the month, called SWEETSPOOKS. Now, SWEETSPOOKS is a score attack game in which players control a ghost, whose objective is to scare kids into dropping their candy. The more candy the player gains, the higher their score. But scare the kids too much and they'll run away, scaring other kids away in the process, which means less candy opportunities. Now, that's just the basic premise. To get to the meat of this project, we're gonna have to actually start working on it, so here's the plan for this episode. We need to first build the basics for our game. This includes the general system, the game will function, and working on the children's behavior and quirks. Basically, the building blocks for our project. So without further ado, let's get to the coding. And in case it matters, yes indeed, I'm still using GameMaker 1.4 on this project because I was yet to be very familiar with GameMaker Studio 2. The first thing we needed to do was establish some points. These points would serve as both spawn points and end points for the children. With the points set up, we could start focusing on the children's code. Before getting to any sort of AI work, we first had to establish the children's endpoints, which is where they will go once they've either filled on candy or are scared off by the player. We needed this point to be chosen at random, so I did exactly that. Once I verified that that was working, I set up something similar with the house points. The house points would be locations where the children would go to get candy, as if trick-or-treating. With all that done, I set up the basic movement to have the children walk from their starting point to their chosen house. So far, so good. Now it was time to start working on their quirks. Now it was important that each child felt unique, so I decided early on that the children needed quirks. Quirks such as candy greed, meaning that the child wouldn't leave a house until they received a certain amount of candy. This, coupled with the random amount of candy each child needed to be considered quote-unquote full, would help double as offsets so that the children weren't all shifting phases at the same times. And yes, at the start, the children were very greedy. So now that we have two theoretical states, fulfilled and unfulfilled, as done in the past, I used the switch function to build the children's quote-unquote brains, and use the default state as sort of a reset. But more importantly was the fulfilled state, which I set up to tell the children who have filled their bags that it was time to go home. And with that, we had the basics for our quirky children done. In a way, we kinda just built a very basic trick-or-treat simulator. But now came the fun part, the spooky part, the player. In the player code, I set up a simple button check. When held, the player would enter a quote-unquote scare state that would affect nearby children within radius. My first attempt at creating a physical being for the children to collide with was using the collision circle function. And similar to the candy greed, I also then added a new quirk to the children, their scare tolerance. So, any children caught in the scared radius of the player, if they weren't already in a state of shock, would then put them in that state. And to summarize a large portion of the remaining code here, if a child is in the scared state, their scare meter increases. And if they have candy, they will start to drop some of it at a certain interval. And much like a child with a full bag, if a child fills their scare meter, they will run home. All was going pretty well here until I tried to reset the child's state once they were no longer in the scare radius. Using the collision circle code didn't seem to allow me to manipulate the child's code as I'd like to, so I went with something simpler, an actual scare circle that would follow the player. And using GameMaker's built-in collision code allowed me to create a simpler, more reliable check for the scare circle, which is the system I would stick with for majority of this project. And there we have it, the very basics for SWEETSPOOKS. We have a player with the ability to scare unsuspecting children, and those unsuspecting children are all unique in that they have their own levels of greed and bravery. Some will demand more candy, while others will withstand the players tormenting them for much longer. A pretty solid start if I do say so myself, so for now, that'll do it for this episode of Let's Dev, the Halloween special. So remember that if you like this video or enjoy Let's Dev in general, be sure to hit that like button. If you aren't already subscribed, be sure to hit that subscribe button and be sure to turn on notifications so you don't miss the next episode. And as always, be sure to leave your spooky thoughts in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.